Dr. Strasberg looked at the television effect on children's school performance. And in his studies, he has determined that a mere 1 to 2 hour of television viewing had a profound impact on children's reading scores, as well as other academic performances. This would help to explain why in the United States, American adults score lower reading score levels than what they should be. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Heiniger examined children exposure to violence in E-rated games. On April 1st of 2001, they collected all sorts of E-rated games that amounted to 55 of them. And of that 55, 64% or 35 of them have intentional violence. Intentional violence is motivating factors to use violence on non-living or inanimate objects, such as crates that contain certain loots, rocks that contain certain materials, etc. And of the 55 E-rated video games, 33 or 60% of them rewarded players for using violence or against characters. These are moving, animate, or quote-unquote living characters. Another background research is from Dr. Genevieve Marie Johnson, which examined the impact of internet home usage on the cognitive development of 128 children in the 6th grade. Parents responded to questions regarding children's internet usage. 83% of families have internet access, which is 106 out of 128. And this was divided into 4 categories, and 65 participants said they used it for learning purposes, 57 said they used it for play purposes, and 35 said they used it for browsing purposes, and 27 said they used it for communication purposes. Dr. Genevieve Marie Johnson wanted to look at the impact that home, schools, and other institutions have on children's cognitive development and behavior. And the behavior aspect was taken by parents and teachers. So in this study, we also found gap research that is the possible impact when children are presented with positive media compared to negative media. So whether it is good or bad, strong or weak, positive impact from media is not really examined too much. We know there is positive impact just as there is negative impact from media, but the degree of which it is impacting, we also want to examine that. So the research question is, what effects do various media have on the behavior and development of children? Most children are plugged into electronic even before they learn to ride a bike. Our study seeks to understand why children of different media exposures tend to behave differently than children of minimal exposure. Our goals are clear as we desire to study these effects, and using it, what we observe, we can identify how physicians and counselors can educate parents and children on healthy exposure to media.
So in order to test our research question, we have to carry out an experiment. We would have to select kids to participate in our experiment by using random selection. We cannot introduce bias, such as picking kids from significantly different age groups or picking kids from the same environment, because there's a higher chance that they are influenced by their similar surroundings. When randomly selecting participants from a population, we have to have a large sample size which is greater than or equal to 30, according to statistics. Therefore, we can randomly select 120 children of the same age. In order to increase the validity of our results, we have to introduce the media to the kids in a neutral setting, such as a white room. We would have 3 groups, one as a control with no media, one as a good influence to the kids, and one of a bad influence to the kids. So the operational definition for this study would be that the media is the type of media that is shown to the children, and the behavior of the children is the variable that is observed as a result of the media. Therefore, we can say that the explanatory variable will be the media exposed to the children, either good, none, or bad media, and the response variable would be the resulting behavior. So with 40 children per group, we would assign observers working on shifts to monitor, personally or through video cameras, the behavior of the children over the course of a month. We would have to use naturalistic observation in order to observe their behavior without any influence or other presence around. So using all of this and all the methods, we can hypothetically relate the media watched to the behavior of the children and their development.
Our hypothesis on our experiment is that we believe that children who are exposed to extreme violence and bad influences in media will turn out to exhibit similar behaviors as they see. The same goes for being exposed to good influential media. We think this because when children learn, they tend to observe, imitate, and try to make behaviors of their own based on what they observe. Our study exposes children to good and bad influential media that they see. Therefore, we can clearly observe the resulting behavior of each of those kids. Bad behaviors, including aggressiveness, undesirable practices in their health and their habits, for example, also disobeying laws and their parents. These would be negative influences of media upon these children. Good behaviors include taking things such as ideas and surroundings very seriously, dedicating themselves towards achievements, to listen to others, participating and engaging in social issues, and following rules. These positive influences of media upon children, we can really clearly observe. From observational data, we can analyze the behaviors of the children and claim that the children exhibit similar behaviors to what they observe from the media and how they take part from those things. So our hypothesis and result is that as we see negative influences of media on children, we will see certain behaviors that correlate to the negative things that they see online. Also, the positive influences, such as anything with taking care of one another or helping one another, we can see these influences on children as themselves.
Findings would suggest that a big impact on children's development is media. Negative behaviors from kids, such as violence, would mean that the children were exposed to media that portrayed bad ideas. And positive behaviors from kids, such as agreeableness, would mean that the children were exposed to media that portrayed good ideas. This study is very important in development of the children. In Erikson's initiative versus guilt stage in development, it is the time in which children start to assert themselves and start school. This stage shows them what is good and bad behaviors in life, and they need to learn what is good and bad properly. With the bad media influence at this age, children will misbehave and take the initiative to behave similar to the media portrayal. If the initiative versus guilt stage is misdirected, then the stage following that will build on their behavior and perhaps worsen into society. Analyzing the behaviors of the study will enable us to communicate with physicians and therapists to come up with a solution and avoid unhealthy exposure of media to children. However, we still have a lot of problems in our research. From ethical perspectives, researchers have a moral and legal obligation to abide by ethical principles, and voluntary decision to participate in research need based on description. However, our children do not fully understand the procedure of the experiment, and they do not have mature cognition, so they can't make decisions properly by themselves. Due to the result of this experiment and Baba-Daw experiment, children tend to repeat the behavior they observed from adult models and caregivers. So, the future education is important to children who are exposed to bad media in this experiment.
Once you have your methods down, it is important to then apply the limitations and future research into your problem to then get a more accurate hypothesis with results. Limitation is the environmental upbringing and setting that can exacerbate some tendencies or inhibit certain tendencies that participants want to display. Differences in environmental upbringing is a variable that can sway the behavior of children greatly when it comes to experiments like this. Exposure to certain content can have less, more, or almost no impact on children because of their environmental upbringing. Those who are more exposed to certain things may react in a less surprised or exasperated way than those who or have never seen certain things. Examination of culture, socioeconomic, and environmental exposure of children need to be taken into consideration, and commonly, the different variable needs to be isolated for experimental usage. You must find that variable that triggers either highly or lowly with the participants in the experiment, and then find a middle ground in between those. You must then accurately examine and collect data about the level of attention or the amount of time spent on certain variables in media. If a larger proportion of participants paid more attention to non-violent variables, yet presented violent behaviors, then we can conclude a different relationship between that variable. Solutions to this may also involve eye tracking devices that can help supplement the data collected from a naturalistic observation. Using these eye tracking devices, we can now find the connection between stimulation with certain variables, either high stimulation or low stimulation, depending on their socioeconomic upbringing, their culture, and the exposure to this said variable. The recency effect will have an effect in future research as well. The most recent exposure to a media can have more profound effect on children than initially presented one. If someone's seen something multiple times, they are going to be prone to react to it less excited or less scared than someone who's seeing it for the very, very first time. This needs to be put into effect and implemented into our experiment. In order to combat this, we will have equal exposure of good, then bad, and then good media. This will then create a balance between someone who has more exposure versus someone who has less exposure. Using the same media and then switching the order will help find and isolate the possible test that has been in effect and recency. Prolonged exposure will help find a constant behavior in this. And with our future research, we have to implement media as one of the indicators of possible external variables that is causing or encouraging a behavior. For this question, multiple tests with external variables related to upbringing needs to be considered. This will then give us a more narrow street to go down in order to find that trigger. Media-triggered behaviors can help physicians and therapists find a possible root cause or variable exasperated or encouraging such behaviors. To examine where to whom the behavior is directed towards can help pinpoint specific variables or commonality amongst subjects.